So this is a rumor. San Antonio Spurs, Greg Popovich, are going to look to recruit LeBron James this offseason and have him sign there. The Spurs are not one of LeBron's rumored teams that Stephen A. Smith and whoever else released, but you have to assume with how smart LeBron is, he recognizes how good of a situation San Antonio is. He recognizes how good of a coach Popovich is. The question is, one, how do you actually make this happen? And then two, if it were to happen, how good would it really be? Well, I think you still have to start with the Kawhi Leonard situation, and I guarantee that LeBron is considering that, and I'm sure that's going to play a part in a potential decision for the Spurs. I mean, if he knew that Kawhi was 100%, then I'm sure that would make his day easier. If Kawhi was not, then you probably don't look to go to the Spurs if you're LeBron, because then you're just never going to get a teammate as good as Kawhi, right? If the Spurs were forced to trade him or whatever were to happen in that situation, maybe he's simply not healthy. I don't know. With how weird that whole thing has been with his quad, I believe it is. So that throws a monkey wrench into the whole thing. But if Kawhi is good to go, we'll assume that moving forward, then you have to get a lot of salary off the books if you're the Spurs. In a perfect world, Rudy Gay would decline his player option. Danny Green would accept his, because Green's a better player, of course. Joffrey Laverne would decline his. It's about $1.6 million. Who knows if he actually does. You're able to get Derek White as well as Brandon Paul off the roster. And then Tony Parker would probably not have to be back, or maybe it could be a bird rights thing, depending on the timing of it all. And then you might even have to knock down Patty Mills' money via, I don't know, trading him for like a cheaper player or something. And then you would have to get Pau Gasol's money off the books. It's a lot of things you would have to do that do seem a bit un-Spurs-like. But if it was for LeBron James, then I think you do it, right? I should mention that there's a chance that Danny Green and Rudy Gay could both decline their player options. That would make your job easier. Danny Green's a good player, though, so I don't know if you would really want to lose him. But if this was the case, right? If you had a roster that was basically LaMarcus Aldridge, Kawhi Leonard, LeBron James, DeJounte Murray, and then players after that, I don't know. There's different combinations. Danny Green could be on the team. Patty Mills could be there. Pau Gasol could maybe be there somehow with his $16 million. I don't totally know, but a lot of shuffling would have to go around. But nonetheless, if that is your big three, and then you have DeJounte as your point guard, I think that's really good. I think that is maybe the best team that LeBron could go to in this offseason. I feel like with Popovich, that's a better team than the Sixers. And when you look at the fact that LeBron wants to play off the ball, sure, DeJounte may not be good enough to be a full-time point guard right now, but between the ball handling that Kawhi can provide, if it would be Patty Mills or someone else, I think that would be good. And with just the offense that the Spurs have, which is so much movement and all that, I think LeBron could play off the ball and be really successful. Sometimes be a spot-up guy, an off-ball screener, cutting to the basket, and I'm sure he realizes that Popovich would probably be the best in the league at getting LeBron those off-ball sets. But then at the same time, you could still give the guy the ball and let him run in pick and rolls and ISOs and some post-ups, and you could have Kawhi and Aldridge play off of that, and I think that would be really successful. I guess the only fear could be, number one, it would take the ball out of Aldridge's hands a bit more, and it's been kind of a thing that he has not been totally on board with the offense, not always running through him. Popovich tried to get Aldridge playing like the beautiful basketball style of the Spurs with a whole lot of movement and all that stuff, and Aldridge doesn't totally want to do that. A lot of the time he wants to post up or he wants to be in simple offensive sets, and if LeBron is there, then that just takes a little bit more away from Aldridge, which could be a risk, but something tells me you'd still be able to figure it out. You'd have so much talent that I feel like that would win over anything else. If we can talk about DeJounte a bit, he's not a shooter, of course. But honestly, I don't think that would be the worst thing in the world, because with Aldridge's ability to stretch as a big man, even if he doesn't shoot threes, he'll take mid-rangers and that type of thing. Kawhi's shooting, LeBron's shooting, and then I think the Spurs' ability to just figure things out the way that Popovich always has. I feel like you'd be fine for the most part. I don't think DeJounte's lack of a jumper would kill you. If this was a worse head coach, then I'd be a little more fearful, but I think they'd be okay. And how would they stack up against the Warriors and the Rockets? I mean, look, defensively, we've seen the Spurs have given the Warriors problems, and I think they would have still lost to Golden State in that series where Kawhi went down, but I do think it would have gone at least 6 games. And, I mean, of course, LeBron is the difference there, right? So, assuming that the rest of the roster would round out well enough, yeah, I think they would be better than the Warriors. And then, I mean, that I would also say they'd be better than Houston as well. I mean, we saw the Spurs figure out how to go at Houston's high-powered offense a couple years back. Of course, they did not have Chris Paul, but I think that series was still a testament to Popovich's ability to find the weakness for the opposing team and just use it to his advantage, you know? The fact that Harden just didn't want to shoot mid-range jumpers and they didn't foul them, and that's another big part of it is the Spurs don't foul. And that's just a couple extra points off the board for teams like Houston and Golden State that they typically get against teams that are not as good, right? And then we've seen LeBron's ability to just be an all-time player. And yeah, I think the Spurs would be the best team in the NBA if LeBron joined them. Another thing we could look at with this, with LeBron, is the dude, I have to assume, he wants to play for a really long time, right? And I have to guess that after these past couple seasons where he's been playing heavy minutes, I mean deep into the 30s, 40 minutes a game sometimes, anytime it's a big playoff game, he plays the entire game. And the Spurs have been so good at maintaining their star players, right? Playing guys in the 20s, low 30s, and then upping their minutes for the postseason. But because they had so many minutes saved from the regular season, they oftentimes looked more energized than the younger athletic teams like the Rockets or hell, even the Heat of a couple years back, you know? So I have to assume that the same thing would happen with LeBron. And I mean, maybe he wouldn't play 28 minutes a game, but maybe he'd get down to 33 minutes a game or so under Popovich, right? And probably wouldn't play 82 games, would probably play around 70, maybe something like that. And that would just be good for him in the long term, right? I mean, it does kind of make sense because LeBron has kind of punted the regular seasons. Let's be honest here, he's done that. But Popovich is the type of coach who's so good that you can get the best of both worlds, which is you can have LeBron not totally care in the regular season, and you can still win 60-plus games, because that's been Popovich's MO for a long time now, right? So that would be good. What also would be interesting is how willing would LeBron be to really play in that system? Because this is what I believe. I do think LeBron is such a smart basketball player that he recognizes what his team should be doing versus the other team. Like, he'll notice the matchups and the plays that can work and not work and all that stuff, right? And I think up to this point, he has not had a coach outside of Spoelstra who has been able to get to that level. So as a result, we've seen him be a contrarian to the head coach and have a lot of passive-aggressive energy and all that. And I think it's because he knows I'm smarter than this guy, okay? Like, the stuff he's running, that's just a waste, okay? Like, let's not have these 7 possessions that don't go to me because they're not going to result in productive basketball, right? But I think he would have the respect with Popovich to be like, okay, I trust Pop to run something successful or to have a game plan that is the go-to thing that's going to work, right? And it would be interesting if he would be a little more willing to not butt heads with the coach as much. Now, another thing that should be said is I don't think LeBron has the Tim Duncan ability to get yelled at by Pop in front of the team and be okay with that. I think LeBron would probably have some problems there. I mean, in Brian Windhorst's book, The Return of the King, which is, really good, he said that in Game 7 of the NBA Finals against the Warriors at halftime, Ty Lue just kind of ripped into LeBron, and he said, hey, you got to be better, And LeBron reacted, but he was also kind of like shooken up by it as well. And he's also been a guy to sometimes upstage his head coach and not afraid to embarrass him. And it would be interesting, what happens. I mean, even as he eventually bought into what Spoelstra wanted to do, it still took like a season and a half for it to finally happen. So, I don't know. That would be very interesting. But I mean, we've seen great players be reined in by great coaches, right? Phil Jackson with Kobe and MJ. That's the immediate one. I couldn't really think of another one, but, maybe this would be what LeBron would buy into, is Popovich. So, I don't know. That would be interesting, but still, a lot of things need to happen in terms of money and player options and potential trades and maybe a buyout here and there. It would get pretty dicey, but I think if the Spurs were really committed to getting the money to where it needed to be, I think they could get to a spot to get LeBron, and if Kawhi is healthy, that could be a hell of a team.